This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Rock City Cannabis Carnival, Winter Edition, hosted by #Hydro Inc. On Saturday, December 18th, join us at the Main Street Armory in Rochester, New York, for what is surely to be the cannabis event of the year. With over 90 vendors showcasing the best flower, edibles, concentrates, infused foods and drinks, clothing designs, jewelry, CBD, and more, this event should definitely land high on your priority list. And it wouldn't be a carnival without live DJs, a THC-infused drink bar, stilt walkers, aerialists, carnival games, and so much more. This is a 21-plus event, and tickets are on sale now at etix.com and through mainstreetarmory.com, which you can access in the show notes. So whether you're a joker, a smoker, or a midnight toker, come check out the Rock City Cannabis Carnival Winter Edition on December 18th for what is sure to be the most epic cannabis event that New York State has ever seen.
The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any outside institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everyone? My name is Steve Vanderwall, and I'm the host of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. This podcast will cover a full spectrum of topics, including cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between. Because let's face it, the cannabis industry is very complicated. It's robust, and it has a ton of moving parts. So it's going to be my job to help you understand it a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you really like the show and are interested in sponsoring, please shoot me an email at logistics@cannabiscumlaude.com. Now enjoy the show. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. We're doing a little bit of a special edition here. Today it's Thursday, about 1 o'clock, and we are coming off of the Rochester Cannabis Symposium that took place at the Comedy at the Carlson Event Center last night. Huge lineup of speakers, including the chair of the Cannabis Control Board, Tremaine Wright, representatives from Senator Cooney's office, and my two guests today. One you know very well, Rachel Partington, rising star cannabis attorney. And it is my distinct pleasure to have Kristin Jordan of Park Jordan here today. Also a very well-known cannabis attorney who I had the pleasure of meeting last night. Ladies, thanks so much for joining me on the show. I know you've had a busy couple of days, but I appreciate you taking some time.
Thank you so much for having us, Steve. Thank you. So nice to be here.
Of course. So, Kristin, I know you have a really awesome backstory that I learned a little bit about last night. But I'm curious, how did you get into cannabis? How did you get where you are today? I'm kind of interested, who is Kristin Jordan?
Yeah. Well, my cannabis career started, I think, in 2015 when New York passed the Compassionate Care Act. And I realized that the application process looked very similar to the application process for liquor licenses. And having been an attorney representing the hospitality industry for years, I thought that would be a new business line for me as an attorney. So really, it started primarily as a business opportunity. However, I had been a long time cannabis consumer, but didn't really understand that I was consuming both for wellness and also for medicinal use. I think my journey personally really started on the business side, but the trajectory includes understanding around wellness, euphoria consumption, medicinal consumption, and the social justice movement, frankly, within the advocacy space.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like we all kind of have our little, our personal experiences with cannabis. Like you said, I like how you said medicinal or wellness. I think they're very two distinct categories. I think you do have the recreational market where it is, hey, I just want to smoke weed to get high. And that's cool. We all do that. There's also the medical market where people really do have chronic illnesses that they need, to be alleviated through cannabis, whatever that is. But I also like to hear, and I've said this a lot, cannabis also belongs in this wellness market, this daily wellness market, whether it's sleep, whether whether it's just general happiness, whatever it is. Joe Rogan said, I smoke weed to take away the angst of everyday life. And that's something that always stuck with me. So thanks for sharing. You had mentioned to me last night that you had done some work with a multi-state operator cannabis firm. We usually are really small craft focused. We don't ever really get to hear what's going on behind those scenes. Obviously those are much different operations. What was your experience like that doing that?
Yeah, so I worked for one of the incumbent medical operators here in New York, a multi-state operator, and that experience was eye-opening. For the longest time, I'd really been involved on the small business side as an educator and as an activist. And frankly, it was very easy to throw stones at the what we would refer to as big cannabis, not having any insight into the actual operation of these entities. In November of 2019, I was lucky enough to get a position running the real estate department for one of the incumbent operators here in New York. And man, it was fascinating to say the least. I think I have a whole section of gray hair now as a result of that employment. But it was tiring, to say the least. I was on the road applying for licenses and securing real estate for several months at the front end of my career. And then COVID happened. And so we had to deal with what that meant for all of our retail operations and our leased properties. So it was incredibly busy. I think what's interesting about real estate in most corporate entities is that you end up touching a lot of the different departments, unlike some of the other departments in a larger corporation. But for real estate, you interact with tax, accounting, operations, licensing, really all aspects. So it was a great way for me to see firsthand how one of the big operators functions in this highly regulated industry. And, I'm sure it goes without saying, it is challenging. It is challenging for the big operators. It will be challenging for the small operators. And we're really excited. I'm really excited to see what our regulators are going to do about creating a pathway for small operators to make that challenge a little lighter.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think, and I've done my fair share of stone throwing at big cannabis, but here's the reality. With the demand that we're going to see from New York State, we are going to need their existing infrastructure to satisfy it, if we can even satisfy it right off the bat, right? How many people are in the state?
20 million.
20 million people. There's a lot of cannabis consumers, and it could arguably be the biggest cannabis market in the states, outside of California. So,
100%, especially when you include, all of our tourists and hospitality guests that come in and out of New York State and throughout the state, not just New York City, but, we have visitors that cross the border from Canada. We have visitors who come to see the falls and all the wonderful things that Western New York has to offer.
But what I'm interested, and I don't know if you've ever been able to see these operations, and we're always talking about craft growing here, small scale growing, hands-on. I've seen some large operations. The largest I've ever seen and walked through was a 20,000 square foot grow, which in the grand scheme of things is still a craft grow. What was it like operationally inside one of these large cultivation facilities? I'm sure, the people running these, they're very smart, they're very wealthy. There's a lot of, I'm sure they have some of the top of the notch equipment and controlled environmental ag stuff. Like what did a big cannabis cultivation operation look like?
Very sterile, very clean, very regulated, very secure, cameras everywhere. We had to wear booties and clothing coverings everywhere. It is almost hospital-esque in the way that it operates. Because it's such a highly regulated industry, the infrastructure and the security surrounding all of these facilities is tremendous.
Yeah. I even when I went, my buddy owns this medical operator. They're getting a license up in Maine called East Coast Cure, and they, they're craft. They're about 20,000 square feet. But even when you went in there, we had to go to their demarcation room. We had to, put our booties on, our scrubs on, our hair nets and beard nets on. Because when you have people walking through there, you get somebody with a pathogen on, and if you're running a monster grow, that whole pathogen, that could be $1 million wiped out. So it's, I mean, cleanliness on a large scale, people need to be clean even on their home grows too. Make sure you're washing your hands, wearing gloves, etc. But it is really interesting. I mean, growing cannabis on a small scale is challenging. You know, it's right. I've always been a small grower. Most of my friends are small growers. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money to get up and running, especially if you're doing, some of these new LED lights, $1,500. I can imagine the costs associated with one of those cultivations. But it is fascinating. It's got to be very operationally fluent. Funny enough, my buddy up in Maine that I was just talking about, his director of operations was the former VP of operations at Curaleaf. So that she was able to really bring in that knowledge of operations. Like, here's our whole calendar out for 21-day default, flipping this room this day, and they run very fluently, and that's because she did pull a lot of her experience from these big operators.
Steve, to me that is a prime example of why the slogan that this is the wild, wild west just really doesn't apply to cannabis. I think that there's a narrative around cannabis as an industry that folks are running ragged and don't really know what they're doing. That's not my experience at all.
False.
This is a highly regulated industry, and despite all the puns you see, people take this very seriously.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even some of these gray market operations that are happening locally, they are branded, they are staffed, they have SOPs, they have products, they are a real business. You know what I'm saying? So I think we're starting, a lot of people say, oh, if you sell weed, you're a drug dealer, or you're, some sort of criminal. These people are sophisticated. Right. Not to mention, running an illicit market business, not only do you have to be savvy like a regular business person, but you need to learn you need to stay out of the eyes of the law.
That's right.
A lot of these, illicit market business owners are very brilliant people, super savvy. So it's I don't know, it's really fascinating. We had started talking about last night this problem with real estate. I was really interested in it because it's something that I don't ever get to talk about because it is such a niche subject. I'm hoping that we can kind of relive that conversation we were having last night because it's fascinating, and I don't really think people realize the problem that it is.
Yeah, I really identified this as an issue a couple of years ago as I was looking for a real estate role at one of these operators because, frankly, given the program that we had, the existing program that we had, which was limited to medicinal in the past couple of years, there really wasn't an opportunity for me to bring my skill set in real estate and law to the industry unless we passed our adult use bill and the medical operators were more sophisticated in their outlook on real estate. So I was really fortunate to have this role with one of the incumbent operators. But it was enlightening to see the lack of sophistication around real estate for the industry. And I don't necessarily blame the industry. I blame my industry of real estate because the majority of the large houses, the real estate firms, the national firms are publicly traded. They do not do cannabis and they do not support our industry. And that lack of expertise is really sorely missed here. And I see that all over the place in the way that, for instance, the brokers are interacting with heads of real estate at the big operators. Traditionally, there are corporate real estate relationships where, the brokerage firms will source out and suss out all of the opportunities and make sure that they comply with local regulations. That's not happening now. In my role with the operator, I was getting flyers from all over the country that weren't vetted, that I did not even have any interest in pursuing because they weren't within the requirements that we were looking at. But it was just a sort of a disorganized throw things up at the wall sort of scenario. And in my role, I was a department of one, and so to have to suss through mountains of flyers from all over the country, it just didn't make any sense. And so in that role, I would complain and try to find the resources I was looking for. Unfortunately, I was restructured out of a position in March, and I realized, this is an opportunity. And so my business partner, Barrington Rutherford, who is a chairman of the board for Park Jordan, is currently my counterpart at Cresco, one of the other operators based in Illinois, and he will join me by the end of the year to be a principal at Park Jordan, but he and I would complain all the time that we just didn't see the resources that were typically available in our other areas of commercial real estate. And we just see this as an opportunity to help the industry along, because he and I have both not only applied for many licenses, I think probably about 40 licenses total between the two of us, but we've also lived and breathed within these spaces. And that, to me, is also the challenge. The brokers that you're dealing with, the leasing attorneys that you're talking to, typically have never operated or even been in a dispensary or a cultivation facility. And, there are things that are really unique about our industry, the way that we live and breathe, the security, the types of infrastructure that are required, the vaults, for instance. All of these things are very special and unique to our industry in a way that other parts of commercial real estate aren't impacted.
Now, Park Jordan, is that going to be a real estate focused firm? Are you going to do, what are really going to be your specialties? Yeah, so our goal is to really be a full service advisory services real estate firm. So our primary focus, of course, is the transaction. But unlike traditional brokers, we want to be your full partner, really truly invested in a way that, maybe your consultants and your attorneys aren't, because they are fee based. The majority of our work will be commission-based because it is transactional, and we get paid by the landlord or the owner, depending on whether or not you receive that license. And it's up to us to make sure that we're crafting the right kind of agreements that not only will pass muster with the regulatory body, but will also give the flexibility to the tenant slash operator in the event that they aren't successful in obtaining that license. We also see another very big value add for our firm is being educators to the landlords and to the owners, right? So a lot of these brokers, again, they can't explain to the owners or the property managers, what this process will look like, what some of the risks are involved, because this is still federally illegal. We still don't know. I have a timeline from our regulators as to when this is all going to go down. And so we want to be really honest and transparent with those landlords and property owners, because they are essentially your partners. What risk do property owners carry? Say you're just a landlord, or you own a 20,000 square foot building, you have nothing to do with your incoming tenant. Do these landlords carry risk for these businesses that operate inside their walls?
100%. This is federally illegal. Now, we've never seen enforcement, and under the 2 administrations ago, we had some protections for medical programs, but right now we don't have that. And so while we've never seen federal enforcement,
it could happen.
It could happen. And so making sure that you have protections in your lease or in your closing documents that prevent liability from falling on the side of the owner and the non-licensed entity is very important.
This is stuff that is important whether you're a small craft business or you're a multi-state operator, but a lot of small business owners, not all, this stuff is really high level and not everybody has access to this type of information. Most people are just trying to figure out, how am I going to grow, or how am I going to make my products, or not, how am I going to make sure this lease is good, or blah, blah, blah. How do we is it possible to make services like this available to small businesses who may not have that MSO budget?
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. And because we are commission-based we get paid by the ownership on the close of the transaction, we're actually a free service to most of the operators, right? And so you're getting the expertise and the value there really without having to pay a dime, just a commitment that you'll work with us exclusively. Because if we're going to put in that time and energy, we want to know that you're not going to circumvent us and find another deal. But the difference between us and other brokerage firms is that we want to be your partner throughout the life of the lease. And so, these small operators who might, for instance, need assistance in finding the security company who knows how to provide the overlays for your license application, we have those relationships. And we know as soon as those licenses the applications come out, all of those entities are going to be, very, very busy. And because we have those relationships previously, it's not a cold call to a security company to try to find those talents to support your application. In addition, I really believe that as soon as the licenses are issued and folks are ready to build out their locations, those general contractors and expediters, the ones who are knowledgeable in our industry, they're going to be, extremely busy, and to have access to those folks who've done this before, either in other states or for the incumbent medical operators, man, that's going to make the world a difference. And navigating through a Department of Buildings, through the permitting process, having knowledgeable people who can talk to inspectors and explain to them exactly what they're looking at because they've never done this before, will help to, lessen the burden of an operator. Our hope is that we're really giving the operator all the tools and resources and really taking care of the real estate piece so that they can concentrate on running their business.
Yeah, because I know, like me, I know as a business owner, there's all these business things that you have to do, but quite frankly, I like to work in the cannabis side. A lot of the stuff, the payroll, all the stuff. I wish I could just say, here's all the shit that I don't want to do. I trust you. You're great. Here, and you essentially have an entire, fleet of talented employees that no small business owner could ever hire all those people on full time. So to be able to have, that boutique firm, have all the experts, really be a turnkey service in cannabis, and also having that big experience that you have. I really think you guys are set up for success. I'm
really excited. We are also the only, as far as I know, the only BIPOC owned commercial real estate brokerage firm, not only in the cannabis space, but generally.
Really?
My business partner is a Black gentleman from Chicago. Cool. I am Korean American and I'm an immigrant. And I don't know of any other women owned commercial brokerage firm in the country.
So let me ask you this. So in terms of, when applying for licenses, will there be social equity considerations if businesses work with outside BIPOC firms? If we said, hey, we're this, we're a woman-owned business, but we're also using a BIPOC law and real estate firm, a BIPOC construction firm. Are those things taken in consideration from a social equity perspective?
We're yet to see what the regulations say, but it can't hurt. And certainly, I think my additional value is that I am a community leader in the greater New York area. I also wear another hat where I am the founder of the Asian Cannabis Roundtable. And so bringing additional resources that are BIPOC and marginalized communities, I think always is beneficial for any small business.
Huge. Yeah. And it really, as we start to look at our build out and what it looks like, it's like, I want to keep all the business as close to home as possible, the GCs, the plumbers, the electricians, and really make it a community thing, and I think I genuinely think that that's how it is for most of the cannabis industry. It is very community-based. People genuinely want to see local entities rise up and all the surrounding partners rise up. So
isn't it a unique industry? I don't see that in any other area, in law, in real estate. Just this community of people who really want to help other people is tremendous.
The plant brings people together. Maybe that's just us
as New Yorkers. I don't know.
It is. Well, you've been awfully quiet over there, just absorbing everything.
Well, Kristin has a lot of expertise to talk to, so I'm just quietly fangirling her over here.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of firepower on that stage last night between the real estate conversations, the MRTA kind of overviews, Jason's tax analysis, which still hurts me knowing what at the end of the day what these taxes are going to be on retail. And one of the things that we were talking about before we got here was taxes and cultivation and this concept of 280E. And, before we wrap up, this is something that I'm personally interested in. Could you tell our audience a little bit about how 280E works and how it affects cannabis or how it affects businesses?
280E is a section in the U.S. tax code that prevents cannabis businesses from deducting the normal business deductions. The only deduction, and forgive me, I am not a tax attorney, but as far as I understand, the only deduction that is permissible is the cost of goods, which is actually your plant material. Odd way that all played out. But that really presents such a onerous tax burden on these companies that, in a lot of ways, plant touching businesses are, almost prohibitive in a lot of ways. So that is something that absolutely we'd love to see addressed on the federal level.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of a shock to me because when I think COGS, especially from a cultivation perspective, that's everything. It's utilities, it's water, it's newts, it's rockwool cubes or soil or whatever. And you're saying that none of that stuff is write-offable, huh? That's a stinger.
It is. I would suggest you have a tax professional who can speak to this in a little greater
detail.
Jason,
I'm coming for you. It is. It's challenging, and it makes it. Everybody does think that you get into this cannabis business and you're rich, right? You're in the drug market, and you can make good money, but it is not all profit. It is far from that. I know people who are running very, very, very successful legal adult use businesses, killing it. But they're still getting taxed at damn near over half their money.
That's
and
right.
It's, on top of all the labor and on top of utilities, it does become very difficult. But then the issue is, well, if we federally legalize, great, that goes away. But it introduces another problem of big cannabis takeover. I personally think that there is plenty of room to coexist, right? We look at the beer market. You can walk into Wegmans, buy a 30-pack of Bud Light for $13, or go to other half brewing and get a 4-pack for $24, and they sell out every single week, right? They'll never be as big as Anheuser-Busch. Their costs will never, their margins weren't made, but the point is I think craft cannabis and big cannabis can exist, but people in the small scale have to understand that there is a ceiling. Be okay with making your few $1,000,000 a year,
That's right.
Focus on quality. Don't try to get too big. I see so many people who have, and I've had these thoughts too. If I can grow this size, I can grow quadruple that size. I can add another 10,000 square feet. It's a lot. And if you don't have the right staff and the know-how, it can easily turn for the worst. So I challenge everybody, maximize your small square footprint because you can. And if you do it right and you take care of your plant and you do all the right things, you can make a hell of a living in a very small square footprint.
100%.
So, that's about the time we have today. Does any closing remarks, any burning things, anything exciting coming up? Actually, I do want to say, where can people find you?
So I can be found at parkjordan.com. You can email me. My name is Kristin, Kristin, Jordan, Jordan, at parkjordan.com.
Cool. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. It's such a fun podcast because one week we'll have a small grower, one week we'll have a business, one week we'll have a legal person, tax, and it's so cool to just kind of this industry, there's so much to learn. And once you think you have a grasp on something, you realize there's a whole nother universe of things that you don't know. So this is something that I was personally very uneducated about. I think our audience will be very grateful. So thank you both for joining. I appreciate it.
Steve, I'm so glad to have met you, and I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing here in the greater Rochester area. It's so important to educate people and to bring them into the conversation. This progressive bill that we just passed only happened because lay people got involved and cared about these issues. And, unlike any other industry, people care about cannabis. Really? It matters to people. There are stakeholders that are patients, business owners. It runs the gamut. It touches so many people. It's one of the few issues that is bipartisan.
Yes.
Now, how we get there, that is a partisan issue. But the fact that we need to legalize, the fact that we need to bring people out of jail, that we need to right the wrongs of criminalization, we all agree on these things.
Yeah, we do. And that's the one thing I love about cannabis. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, male, female, trans, gay, straight. People love cannabis. They'll vote for cannabis. And it seems to be the one unifying political thing that people will say, I don't care what the party line is, I'm going to vote for cannabis. Right. So I do have I've been very happy with the way Governor Hochul has, really came in and laid the hammer down and put things in motion that should have been put in motion a long time ago. And I think at this rate, I think it looks good for her at the ballot box next year. Cannabis people, we've seen it in Michigan. They come out and vote. And so far, I'm really excited with everything that's happened.
New Yorkers have a short memory, but let's remember that we lived under a different administration who wanted a different bill.
Very different. That was a very challenging fight with that administration. And the fact that it turned out as well as it did is kind of a miracle, to be honest. But I'm thrilled. Well, thank you, everybody. That's been another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. Kristin Jordan here from Park Jordan, and my good friend Rachel Partington here today, talking cannabis and real estate and multi-state operators. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn and all other social media platforms, as well as Cannabis. And if you'd like to help support the show, search up Cannabis Cum Laude on Patreon. And of course, all of those links are in the show notes. Thanks for watching and listening.